Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Payares Montoya, and I'm a researcher with the Public Policy Institute of California's Economic Policy Center. Thank you for tuning in for our program today, featuring the findings of a new PPIC report, California's Energy Workforce, Needs and Opportunities. This research and today's event are supported with funding from Blue Shield of California Foundation and the James Irvine Foundation. If you are interested in learning more, the report, policy brief, technical appendices, as well as the slides from today's presentation are available on our website at ppic.org. For today's program, I will present some of the key findings from our report, and then my colleague and co-author, Sarah Vaughn, will join me for a discussion on additional takeaways. And at the end of today's programs, we have set aside some time to answer audience questions. If you have a question for us, please send an email to the address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And be sure to include your name and organization along with your question. As a reminder, PPIC is a public charity and does not take or support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. And with that, I will begin my presentation. California is a major energy producer and consumer, and a leader in the shift toward renewable energy. Over the past few decades, fossil fuels have declined as a share of production and consumption, while renewable energy generation and distribution have increased. The energy sector remains a major source of jobs, but the workforce is undergoing a long-term transition. Federal policy, technology, and other factors make the pace and direction of this shift uncertain, yet the workforce is already changing. Tracking these changes is key for policymakers planning the future of the energy sector in California. The energy sector can be defined in different ways. For this analysis, we focus on jobs in the following industries: fossil fuel generation and distribution, renewable energy generation and distribution, scientific and technical services, energy efficiency services, manufacturing and construction, and environmental management, conservation, and regulation. Examples of occupations captured by this definition include petroleum engineers, gas plant operators, solar installers, electricians, and heating and air conditioning mechanics. It's important to highlight that we focus on jobs directly tied to energy production, distribution, and related services. Our definition does not include indirect jobs, like those provided by local businesses serving the communities where energy workers live, or by companies that supply goods used by the energy sector. In some of the next slides, I will separate the fossil fuel subsector from the energy sector overall, given the potential challenges it may face in the coming years. The fossil fuel subsector is an important part of the economy and the energy workforce, and is highly concentrated in certain regions of California, as we will see. In this chart, you can see the number of jobs in the energy sector, left axis, and the fossil fuel subsector, right axis. According to our analysis, California has about 1 million energy jobs, nearly 6% of all state employment. Fossil fuels represent close to 10% of the energy sector jobs. Most energy sector jobs are in construction, which accounts for about 50% of energy jobs, followed by professional services, 30%, and manufacturing, 11%. Utilities and extraction, often associated with the energy sector, make up a smaller share of the sector's job, close to 6%. Now, I will highlight the key demographic and employment characteristics of California's energy workforce. As you can see in the first set of columns to the left, about 85% of energy workers are men, compared to 54% in the workforce overall and 92% in the fossil fuels subsector. Nearly 1/3 are age 50 or older, similar to the broader workforce. Latinos make up 46% of energy workers, compared with 37% statewide and 53% for the fossil fuels subsector. Close to 40% of energy workers are foreign-born, compared with 32% in the overall workforce. These patterns are influenced in part by the large share of construction jobs in the energy sector. As you can see in the map to the left, energy jobs as a share of total employment are spread across many parts of the state. Because of data availability, this analysis covers only metropolitan areas, and it does not include some rural parts of California. Overall, energy jobs are most prevalent in San Jose metro area, 8% of total jobs in that region, San Diego metro area, 7%, and San Francisco metro area, close to 7%. In terms of total numbers, nearly half of energy jobs are in LA, San Francisco, and San Diego metro areas. The map to the right shows the fossil fuels workforce as a percentage of regional employment. These jobs are heavily concentrated in Bakersfield metro area, Vallejo metro area, and Riverside metro area. The geographic distribution of energy jobs is explained by some energy activities tied to very specific locations, such as refineries or solar energy farms, while others, like energy efficiency services, are spread more widely, especially in densely populated areas. For energy workers, the sector offers high wages and other benefits. In terms of wages, it pays $45 the hour for the median worker versus $26 the hour for California workforce overall. 74% work full-time versus 66% for California overall. In the case of fossil fuel workers, 20 to 22% are unionized versus 15% for California overall. Energy sector workers also get opportunities even if they lack a bachelor's degree. 47% have no more than a high school diploma. And they also get more on-the-job training. These jobs tend to have strong technical skills, carry greater responsibilities, and face more hazards than other occupations, which may, in part, explain some of the difference in wages and benefits I just mentioned. Next, we explore the sector needs for the coming years. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the next decade, the energy sector is projected to grow 7 to 8%, slightly below California's job growth. But this growth will be uneven. For example, solar installers are expected to expand rapidly, while fossil fuel occupations, like petroleum pump operators, are likely to decline sharply. These projections were made before the latest political shifts at the federal level, and there is no certainty that these are the changes we will be seeing in the coming years for the energy sector. Additional factors influencing these shifts include state policy, demographic and economic trends, concerns about energy affordability, technological innovation, and private investment decisions. Regardless the pace of the change, we explored a set of occupations that are likely to grow if the transition to renewable energy continues. This was based on national research that identifies the jobs most likely to grow to support new energy source development. These occupations include construction laborers, solar photovoltaic installers, and energy engineers, among others. We find that, in aggregate, the growing occupations will require relatively higher educational attainment at the entry level when compared to the current composition of the energy workforce. As you can see in the figure, a large percentage of future energy jobs, column to the right, are projected to require at most a high school diploma, 42%. However, that's lower than the share in today's energy workforce, 51% in the column to the left. On the other hand, occupations that drive new energy sources and technology are likely to need more college-educated workers than today's energy workforce, 44% compared to 39%. Besides the set of occupations that are expected to grow, there's another set of 17 occupations we identify as more likely to shrink in the energy sector. Some examples include service units operators in oil and gas, petroleum engineers, and other extraction workers. These occupations are highly concentrated in the industries that make up the fossil fuel subsector, meaning these kind of jobs are almost unique to businesses working in oil and gas. These occupations are also especially relevant for a handful of regions where they represent a big share of total fossil fuel jobs. For example, 40% of fossil fuel jobs in Bakersfield metro area, 24% in San Diego metro area, and 22% in San Francisco metro area. In absolute terms, most shrinking fossil fuel jobs are located in LA, Bakersfield, and Riverside metro areas. Our analysis also explores whether workers in shrinking fossil fuel roles could move into other occupations based on their skills and job characteristics. Many of these jobs have skills in demand elsewhere, but transitions will require additional training. However, wages present a major challenge. The chart you see on the screen compares median wages for the fossil fuel occupations projected to shrink, horizontal axis, with median wages for similar jobs, vertical axis. 74% of these related occupations pay less than fossil fuel jobs, meaning only 1/4 related occupations will pay more. About half of the closest occupations are within the broader energy sector, potentially easing the transition. The rest are in other economic sectors like manufacturing. But let me emphasize the following. Larger metro areas like LA or San Francisco offer more alternative opportunities than smaller labor markets like Bakersfield metro area. In that regard, displaced workers will have fewer opportunities to find alternative occupations in those smaller regions. To conclude, the pace of California's energy transition depends partly on policy choices. Efforts to support workers need to take a multifaceted approach that combines targeted training, strategic economic development plans, and tailored support services. Meeting future workforce needs will also require investments in education and training at all levels, from post-secondary education to on-the-job training for high school graduates. Partnerships among industry, unions, and workforce agencies can help align training with state investment and private sector needs. If you have a question, please send it along with your name and organization to the email address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And now I invite my colleague and co-author, Sarah Bond, to join me for a discussion on additional key takeaways.
Hi, Daniel. So we thought we would dig a little bit deeper on some of our key findings while we wait for your questions to come in. And please don't be shy. Feel free to ask any questions you have related to this research. So we wanted to start by kind of setting a little bit of context for why PPIC is studying this issue of the energy sector workforce. At the Economic Policy Center, we're really focused on understanding how Californians are doing economically and how economic policy choices are shaping our state today and into the future. And really, energy policy is economic policy, I would say, in many respects. It's so fundamental to economic growth, to having reliable energy, for businesses, sectors to locate and grow, and for, of course, households to have access to affordable energy. And while we're here, I thought I should make a plug because PPIC is hosting a conference all about energy on August 21st, 1 week from today. And you're welcome to attend in person in Sacramento or online. So that conference will be discussing wider economic policy issues related to energy, as well as the state's energy goals, kind of demand, infrastructure, all sorts of issues. We focused on the workforce side of the energy sector in this report because it is a key area of research at PPIC, given how critical it is for individuals to have access to the kinds of jobs that they want in California, and how critical it is for us collectively to be able to meet state workforce needs, just to be able to ensure that we can deliver, in this case, the energy that the state needs today and into the future. So the energy sector workforce is just one of the essential workforces that we identified to study in the first year and a half of the Economic Policy Center. So we really aim to understand kind of dimensions of the workforce as Daniel presented, and also just how opportunity is shifting, to understand kind of where opportunity may be shrinking and where it might be growing, to shed light on both policy solutions and opportunities for Californians. So Daniel, I thought maybe we could start, or maybe you could dig a little bit deeper and share more about what we learned and what we know is happening in that kind of shifting opportunity where it's shrinking in the fossil fuel sector.
Perfect. No, so let me start by mentioning again some of the stats we use in the presentation. And when we talk about the fossil fuel subsector in California, we are talking more or less around like 90,000 to 100,000 jobs in the state. That's close to 10% of all energy jobs in California. And as I mentioned, those are like well-paid jobs that offer a bunch of opportunities for people without a bachelor's degree. They are usually very concentrated in specific places. I mentioned Bakersfield a number of times, but also in Vallejo, for example, here around the Bay Area. And we know that things have been changing in this sector or in this subsector of the energy sector, not only because the matrix in terms of energy generation and consumption has been shifting in California for the last couple of years, but also because we are able to follow what happens with some refineries across the state, right? So, for example, in 2020, the Marathon Martinez oil refinery in Costa Costa basically closed, and 700 workers needed to find new jobs, and that has been a struggle for them. And we also know, according to the news, that, for example, Phillips 66 is also planning to close a refinery in LA the next year. Those are 900 workers. And Benicia oil refinery in the Bay Area is also planning to close next year. So those will be 400 additional workers. So we know things have been shifting and changing for fossil fuel workers. And those jobs are important for not only for them, but also for the communities where they are located. So we try to understand a little bit more what's going on with those workers, what potential opportunities they could have to transit to other sectors of the economy or within the energy sector. And we find that yes, there are opportunities given that this is very skilled labor force, but at the same time, those opportunities may not be paying them or providing them with the same benefits they are getting right now, which is the concerning part of all this transition, right? But yes, I mean, it should be a goal of policy to think and to do something about how these workers can keep engaged with the labor market and keep having access to jobs that provide economic mobility and opportunities for them.
Yeah, thank you for that. On the topic of skills, I personally was heartened in this research that we found such alignment between the skills of the fossil fuel sector workforce, in particular with other occupations in both the energy sector more broadly and in other parts of the economy. And for us as researchers, it was very useful to be able to dig beyond just the level of education or years of experience that often research is stuck with, but to get at a more refined level to understand the tasks and the skills and the kind of conditions that workers face in different kinds of occupations. So but I do want to add the caveat that, you know, although we're able to look at how closely skills are related between, you know, every combination of sets of occupations, you know, we're still looking at it at a relatively broad level and understand that there may be specific training that even if your kind of skills as, say, a petroleum pump operator align in other ways with, say, the skills of a biofuel technician, there may be specific training and experience that is actually needed to make that transition, you know, notwithstanding the geographic and wage barriers that Daniel mentioned. So there's really a critical role for employers, for unions, for educational institutions to, you know, even where there is some overlap in skills and competencies, to help you know, workers affected by industrial transformation really kind of make the leap to new opportunities in other jobs. So Daniel, I thought we might also kind of dig into or say a little bit more about the transition. In the presentation, you mentioned how federal policy is shifting and how there's uncertainty around exactly the pace of change in the energy sector, and, you know, which will flow through to the workforce. But can you say more about what we know so far about the major shifts in federal government policy and how we expect, if we know much at all, about how that will affect California?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't know for sure what's going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years and how this transition is going to evolve. I mean, consumers are key, businesses and private investment are key to define what's going to happen. But we also know that the government is a big player, and especially the federal government. So we are coming from a previous federal administration that was very supportive of this transition and was pouring a bunch of money to make that happen. And this administration has another priority. So a bunch of the funds and resources that were supposed to come to California to help in this transition are not going to be necessarily there in the near term. And it's hard to imagine that the state government is going to be able to close the gap and is going to be able to replace those resources. But that being said, California has environmental goals that are still there. The state government has highlighted that they want to keep those goals, and the public in California, according to what we have been seeing from PPIC surveys, they agree with those goals, and they would like to see the state moving in that direction. However, and this is interesting, at the same time, Californians, they don't want to pay more for energy, for example. They don't agree that they will need to pay more for energy prices in terms to make this transition to happen. So it's going to be interesting how the state government and different stakeholders, as I mentioned, like businesses and private investors, and even the consumers are going to jump in and decide the future of the state in terms of the energy transition.
Thank you for that, Daniel. Describing a hard to a hard situation to predict where we're going to be, but thank you for shedding light on some of the major factors there. So before we go to questions, we wanted to cover one more area that Daniel foreshadowed at the end of the presentation, and that is the dive we did into the research literature on prior industrial transformation. So try to better understand what policy approaches in the research literature have been kind of found to be rigorous and effective to addressing some of the transformation, especially on the kind of adverse side. And I thought I would start with some of the kind of community level impacts, and then Daniel, maybe you could share more about the kind of individual level kind of interventions. There is a large research literature on how industrial change has affected communities, a lot of that around the coal industry, in the Middle East and the Midwest. A lot of that focuses on what we call place-based policy, how you could address the fact that in some communities, there's a lot of reliance on a sector like coal, or in our case, some communities that are heavily focused on oil and gas in California. And the research, there's a huge research literature on this, as well as, of course, practitioners in economic development space who know on the ground about how to try to cultivate new industry and job growth in sectors in communities that may be affected by whole sectors going away. And my view of this research literature is, first, like the key finding is that these industrial transformations have long-term adverse consequences for most communities, and actually mitigating that is very hard and needs very targeted long-term approaches. As a researcher, one of the key questions that we ask, and some really good studies have been able to nail down, is whether the kind of public investments to try to spur new industries to come to these places just replaces what the private sector would have done on its own. And in that case, it's kind of inefficient or could be inequitable. In my view, the most compelling research evidence is around the beneficial effect of investments in infrastructure targeted to communities, disadvantaged communities, or those that are affected by major industrial transformation. That infrastructure seems to be key to opening up the community for kind of private industry to locate and grow there. And I would also add that there's strong research around evidence on targeted investments to specific businesses or specific industries to locate, to grow jobs in key communities. We've published about some of that, like the California Competes tax credit. We refer you to our report from December 2023 on the California Competes tax credit. But there are others across other places in other states that, that suggest that really targeted interventions in communities and sectors is really key to helping communities with the industrial transformation that, is akin to the energy transformation we're seeing in California. So I don't know, Daniel, could you say more about what we found on the kind of worker side, the individual level side from this research literature?
Sure. Let me add a couple of things there. like one is that the literature we consulted, as you mentioned, span like from experiences in different places in the US, mentions that targeting like individuals with training opportunities or education opportunities and like some assistance with their earnings and bridging the gaps between previous earnings and current earnings could be some of the most effective approaches that are available there. But at the same time, like details matter, right? So you like for policymakers, they need to know who they are going to be serving. So for example, research has also found that older workers close to retirement, when you target them with these retraining opportunities or education opportunities, you have like less success than when you target like younger population. So I don't know, like those kind of things need to be very thoughtful, and we need a bunch of creativity in order to address differences in terms of the beneficiaries of these policies. And at the same time, I will highlight that there's currently an experience that people listening could pay attention to, and that's the Contra Costa Refinery Transition Project, which is trying to prioritize job quality and environmental health for the population that was displaced, or the workers that were displaced for the closure of the refinery a few years ago in Martinez. So let's see what the results of that approach works. They are able to put together a bunch of stakeholders, local community, private sector, local authorities, and they are trying to think what to do with what happened in that place. So that to see the results of that could also provide some ideas for what the state can do in other parts of California.
Yeah, and speaks to the importance of collaboration in such a complex challenge across the many institutions involved. Actually, so we're getting some great questions. Thank you all so much for engaging with this research. And I think you actually, Daniel, just touched on two that have come in that are related, one from Luis Flores and one from Aaron Stone about recommendations for refinery workers when refineries close, or kind of what the clean energy sector jobs might mean in terms of opportunity for fossil fuel workers transitioning. So you spoke to that, Daniel, and maybe you want to add more. I will just make a plug for, there is more detail in our report that actually shows the specific fossil fuel occupations that, based on national research, are projected to shrink as a result of this transition, including jobs at refineries and the kind of those that are jobs that are closely related in terms of skill. We modeled this research off of studies by Resources for the Future that is heavily cited in our report, and also links to some of the educational requirements in a more detailed way than we were able to do in this report. So I think the link to specific additional education or training for the kind of transition in occupations that are hypothesized to be a pathway for workers that are affected by refinery closure is an important angle. But Daniel, is there more that you'd like to say about that, or other aspects of supporting workers through this transition?
No, I think what you said about education and training, those are the things the literature seems to agree that are the most effective ones. So yes, now the specifics are what I guess our like audience are interested about. But yes, in the report we provide more details about the specific programs or specific opportunities or specific occupations that could be targeted for these education or training opportunities.
Right. It just occurred to me that one of the nuances in the research literature on how to support workers through transitions is that it can vary a lot across different types of workers. So workers closer to retirement age have a much harder time transitioning, partially because sometimes it means it's kind of a new career that you transition to, even if there is a strong overlap in skills. And so there's an important role for just kind of filling economic needs, wage insurance programs, and that sort of thing in the meantime. Okay, let's go to another question from Lisa Miloy. Apologies if I got your name pronounced wrong, at the Strategic Resource Advisors in Sacramento. How do you expect the changes to the investment tax credits to impact the jobs associated with renewable energy? Oh, this is a great question. Daniel, you may want to take this. I would say right now we don't have a simple quantitative kind of answer for that, as some of these kind of changes to tax credits are going to flow through in coming years. And we'll have to see how much the tax credits, versus other kinds of demand for renewable energy as a, like as an EV driver or as a consumer kind of maybe compensates for changes in the tax credits. So I think it'll take a lot more research to be able to quantify that. But Daniel, could you say anything more on that, or would you like to add anything?
No, we didn't do a specific assessment on different like policies related to the transition. So yes, I wouldn't be able to respond to that.
But we will be watching.
Yes.
All right. Our next question is from Melissa sorry, Melissa K. I'm going to butcher your last name, from the Western Growers Association. She's curious about the data source that we used. Is it federal or state? And she's wondering how many people are working on California energy, but are remote and located outside of California. Oh, this is a great question. Daniel, as the key data wrangler in this project, you deserve all the credit. So I wonder if you want to start by kind of saying a little bit about the data sources that we used.
Yes, well, mainly we use data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but that is representative for California. So they have like a couple of surveys where the data is publicly available, and you have good sample sizes to study specifically California and some of the regions inside California. The OEWS and QCWS surveys, for example. We also use data from the ONET that provides information, also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Is a program inside the Bureau that provides information on occupations, like what are the competencies they have, the kind of skills they require, the type of training they need when entering to the job market. Many of these characteristics allowed us to make the comparison, for example, between fossil fuel occupations and other occupations in the broader economy and within the energy sector. So yes, those would be the main sources that we use, and we even were able to get some state data from EDD in Sacramento.
Yes, and we're grateful to the staff there who helped us get that custom data to be able to say more regionally, which was really important to us, knowing how kind of clustered and some energy sector work is. So the second part of Melissa's question was about remote workers, and this is a very interesting one. I think we were not able to identify kind of who is maybe working remotely, or even who is maybe a contracted worker who doesn't necessarily live in California, but comes in to do specific energy sector projects for a period of time. Those will all be reflected in our in the data that Daniel just described, but we don't really know kind of your place of residence. We just kind of know your place of employment. But it's actually a really interesting and important question, given kind of the massive shift towards remote work that we've seen in the last few years. So one that we can maybe brainstorm more about how we could look at further in future work.
And we do know that for certain occupations, I mean, people need to be present, for example, in order to extract the fossil fuels from the soil, right? Or to operate some of the solar farms in the state, or to construct the infrastructure that is supporting it. But yeah, some of the other services associated with the energy sector, I presume, yes, they could be provided remotely, but yeah, we will then know what's the share of jobs outside California providing those services.
Yeah, very good point. Okay, we have a question from Brian Cook. What type or types of training and education programs should post-secondary institutions be developing to prepare workers for the energy workforce? And this is spot on, and I think is something we are interested in researching further, because we kind of left this descriptive study with kind of just the entry level requirements of different energy sector occupations and how that might be changing. I think I would highlight the findings that Daniel shared around in the new energy jobs that are focused more on the kind of renewable and other sources, newer sources of energy. There is a noticeable shift towards slightly more education required for entry into some of those occupations. and, in aggregate. And so that's even like bachelor's level. But Daniel, do you want to say more about any specifics within that or anything else?
No, I think you covered it.
Yeah, I think there's more to do to actually for us to engage with post-secondary institutions and look at more specific pathways to these occupations in follow-up work. Okay, and next we have a question from Bob Brown of Western States Petroleum Association. Hi, Bob. Nice to hear from you. What about all the contracted and induced jobs and the multiplier impact when a refinery closes? A very good point. Daniel, do you want to revisit, kind of, you mentioned this early on in the presentation, but we could say more about it.
Yes, thank you for that question, Bob. For this report, we focus on direct jobs in the energy sector. That means that indirect jobs and induced jobs are not part of our analysis, but we know for sure that I mean, the entire economy is connected, and the importance of some of these jobs for certain communities is key. For example, there are a bunch of businesses and people that depends on workers in the energy sector, like being employed in order to provide some goods and services to them, like local stores, for example, moms and pop shops, that kind of things. And also we know that some other companies provide also goods like machinery to energy sector businesses, but we didn't include those there. Part of that is because of data availability, so we cannot know for sure which of these people employed in other sectors or industries are directly linked to the energy sector. So we wouldn't be able to say anything more about them.
Yeah, we were really interested in giving a detailed picture of the direct energy workforce that is literally kind of powering energy in the state, so that we could look at all those demographic characteristics, the kind of skills within jobs, the kind of work conditions. And so I think, future work, I keep mentioning future work, but I thinking about some of the broader community and economic impacts is really an important aspect of this transition. And I would plug again the conversation happening a week from today. The PPIC is hosting on energy overall that will kind of touch on some of those as well. And I think we have time for one more quick question if we're really brief. And this question comes from Norman Rogers. Hi, Norman, from USW Local 675. Is there any sense of a timeline for when new jobs will come online? Oof. I think if we knew this, we would be more popular than we are. What would you add on that, Daniel? Any thoughts there?
No, I mean, it's hard to predict with all these things, and it's just very complicated. We lack the information to be able to say something for sure about that.
Yeah, but it's critically important for the workers that are, facing the prospects of their job at the refinery closing. And so that's why, we wanted to point to the kinds of programs that, many of them don't exist anymore in the kind of trade adjustment assistance federal program that were in place to kind of assist workers who were who were facing a gap in opportunity or time away from kind of work where they needed to retrain or retool for new opportunity. Well, thank you all so much for your questions, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you on these issues. As you heard, we have plans for future research and really appreciate your questions and comments. It went by so fast. I'm sorry that we've already reached the end of our program. Daniel, thanks so much for the presentation and this discussion and the work that you did behind the scenes. I'd like to thank our funders, Blue Shield of California Foundation and the James Irvine Foundation. And thank you all again for joining us online. We really appreciate your feedback. We take it to heart and we read it all. So if you are able to kind of scan this QR code on the screen, or later today, you'll receive an email. These are both pathways to get to a short survey where we'd love your input. The recording of this event will be available on PPIC's website, ppic.org, as well as on our YouTube channel soon. So please do share it with your network and others who may be interested in this research. Thank you again for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.